I was standing in the hallway with my keys already in my hand when my phone lit up on the entryway table. Not a text. A call. From my accountant. Warren never calls after 6. In the 4 years he'd handled my finances, my late father's estate, the investment accounts, everything, he had never once called me on a Friday evening. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was already running 15 minutes late, and my aunt had texted twice asking if I'd left yet. I picked up. "Don't go to that dinner." His voice was flat, controlled. The kind of voice that means someone has been sitting with terrible information long enough to get calm about it. "I need you to come to my office. Tonight. Right now." I stood very still in the hallway. My coat was half on, one arm in, one arm hanging. "Warren, I'm literally walking out the door." "I know. That's why I'm calling." "Don't walk out that door. Not tonight. Not to your mother-in-law's house. Please." I put my keys back on the table. "Before I tell you what Warren found, what had been sitting in the paperwork for months, while I was too busy grieving and trusting the wrong people to notice, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt a shift in the air at a family gathering? Like everyone in the room knows something you don't, and the smiles are just a little too wide, and the wine pours just a little too fast? Leave a comment. Tell me if you've been there. Because I thought I was paranoid for years. Turns out I was just paying attention. Warren's office was downtown, 23rd floor, glass walls overlooking the river. He was still at his desk when I got there, which told me everything. Warren was the kind of man who left at 5:15 every single day and had never once apologized for it. The fact that he was still in his chair at 7 p.m. with his jacket off and 3 empty coffee cups on his desk made my stomach drop before he even opened his mouth. He had the documents spread across the table, printed. Not on a screen. Printed, which meant he wanted me to be able to hold them. "Your father's estate," he said. Specifically, the discretionary distribution clause. My father had died 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal. He'd been gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis. In that 11 weeks, he had updated his will. Or, at least, that's what I had been told. The updated will left the family home and the majority of the liquid assets in a trust managed jointly by me and my mother-in-law, Genevieve, until I turned 32. That was 8 days away. I had thought it was a little strange when the lawyer read it. My father and Genevieve had barely spoken in the last 5 years, but I was in shock. I was barely sleeping, and Genevieve was suddenly so warm, so present, so eager to help me with the paperwork and the death certificates and the 100 bureaucratic indignities of losing someone. I was grateful. I thought grief had softened her. Warren folded his hands on the desk. "The will that was filed," he said carefully, "is not the will your father signed." The room got very quiet. There were 2 drafts. Your father's attorney, the original one, Hendricks, who retired last year, he kept copies of everything. He reached out to me yesterday because he saw the estate filing and recognized the discrepancies. The version on file shifts co-trustee authority heavily in Genevieve's favor. Your father's actual signed document gave you unilateral control at 32 with no co-trustee requirement at all. I heard the words. It took me a moment to arrange them into meaning. Someone changed the will. Warren didn't answer. He didn't have to. "And the dinner tonight," I said slowly. "Genevieve's brother is an attorney. Not estate law, he does medical advocacy, conservatorships. He was disbarred in Oregon 4 years ago, but he still consults." Warren slid a page across the desk. "He filed a preliminary petition 2 weeks ago, alleging cognitive impairment. Yours." I looked at the document, my own name printed neatly at the top, followed by language about erratic behavior, failure to manage daily responsibilities, concerns from family members about my mental state following my father's death. "If a judge signs off on a temporary conservatorship," Warren said, "someone else controls your financial decisions, potentially until a full hearing. That takes months. Your 32nd birthday passes. The trust terms reset." I thought about the dinner. The reservation at Genevieve's house in Westchester, up the winding road where cell service dropped to nothing. The text from my Aunt Genevieve's sister asking if I'd left yet, the way Genevieve had called 3 times this week just to check in, her voice honey-sweet in a way it had never been in the 7 years I'd been married to her son. My husband, Callum, had been dead for 2 years. Car accident on the I-95, February. Black ice. After he died, Genevieve had cried at my kitchen table and told me I was still her daughter. She had meant it then. I believed that. Something had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed. Maybe I had just finally run out of usefulness to her, and this was always what was underneath. If I don't go, I said, she files the petition anyway. Probably. But tonight, she was hoping for something more immediate. Something that would look like evidence. Warren looked at me steadily. I don't know exactly what they were planning, but I know her brother is licensed as a patient transport coordinator in New York, and I know there were 2 calls between him and Genevieve last Tuesday that lasted over an hour. I sat back in the chair. Here is the thing about being gaslit slowly, over a long period of time, by someone who loves you just enough to make you doubt the doubt. You don't realize it's happening because it doesn't feel like attack. It feels like concern. It feels like family. Genevieve had never been cruel to my face. She had been worried, perpetually, exhaustingly worried, about my sleep, about whether I was eating, about whether I was handling the estate properly, whether I'd remembered to call the accountant, whether I was keeping up with my father's investment properties. She would sigh when I got things wrong. Just a small sound, a private grief, like she was carrying something heavy for my sake. After Callum died, it got worse. Or I got worse. That's what I had believed. I forgot appointments. I missed emails. I showed up to my father's attorney's office on the wrong day, twice. I cried in the car outside the grocery store and couldn't explain why. Genevieve told me it was grief. She told me grief does things to the mind. She told me, gently, over and over, that she was worried I wasn't coping, that she didn't think I should be making big decisions alone, that she was only saying this because she loved me. And sitting in Warren's office, staring at a document that described me as cognitively impaired, I felt something I can only describe as a key turning in a lock, the missed appointments. My calendar, glitching, emails I could swear I sent, vanished. My father's attorney, the original one, Hendricks, had left the firm before the will was filed. I'd been told he retired, but Warren said he'd reached out. He hadn't retired voluntarily. Genevieve had recommended the replacement. She had offered to help coordinate everything. She had been so helpful. I wasn't falling apart. I had been taken apart, piece by piece, carefully, by someone who needed me to look fragile before I turned 32. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt something go very, very still inside me, the way a room goes quiet right before someone says the thing that cannot be unsaid. I'm going to dinner, I told Warren. He started to object. Not as the person she expects, I said. I need you to do something for me. Can you get Hendricks on a call tonight? Warren looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. I had 3 stops before Westchester. The first was an urgent care clinic I'd looked up on my drive downtown. I paid out of pocket, cash, for a complete cognitive evaluation, the kind they do for patients with reported memory issues. It took 40 minutes. I walked out with a printed assessment oriented to person, place, and time, no indication of cognitive impairment, no signs of acute psychological disturbance. Signed by the physician on duty, time stamped 8:37 p.m. The second stop was to my own attorney. Not the estate attorney, a different one, a woman named Price, who I had hired 4 months ago for an unrelated matter, and who answered her personal cell when I explained what was happening. She told me 3 things. Don't sign anything, don't drink anything you didn't pour yourself, and she'd be monitoring her phone. The third call was to my niece, Petra's daughter, my husband's niece, technically, which made her Genevieve's granddaughter. She was 17, and she had been living with Genevieve since her mother moved abroad 2 years ago. I had always liked her. She was quiet and watchful in the way that teenagers are when they've learned that the adults around them can't be fully trusted. She picked up on the second ring. Aunt, she caught herself. She always called me Aunt even though we weren't blood. Are you coming tonight? I'm on my way, I said. I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. A pause. I could hear the television in the background, the low murmur of the house. Okay, she said quietly. Has your grandmother had any visitors this week? Anyone you didn't recognize? Another pause. Longer. There were 2 men here yesterday, she said finally. She said they were from a moving company, getting measurements, but they weren't measuring anything. They were in the back hallway for like an hour and then they left. I kept my voice even. Is there a bar cart in the living room? The crystal one? Yeah, it's set up. She's been setting it up since this afternoon. There's already a decanter on it. Has anyone gone near it that you've seen? Grandma. Earlier, she was in there alone for a while. I took a breath. I need you to do something for me. And I need you to do it in the next 30 minutes before I get there. She listened. She didn't interrupt. The decanter on the bar cart. Take it to the kitchen, pour everything out, rinse it twice, and refill it with cranberry juice from the fridge, then put it back exactly where it was. I paused. If it's already open, use tongs or a dish towel. Don't touch the stopper with your bare hands. Can you do that? Grandma's upstairs. Dad's not here yet. I know. You have time. Can you do it? Her voice was barely above a whisper. What is she trying to do? I wasn't going to lie to her. She was 17, and she lived in that house. She deserved the truth. I think she put something in it, I said. I think she was going to give me a drink and then tell everyone I was sick. I think some people were going to come and take me somewhere. I heard her breath catch. You're not in any trouble. You haven't done anything wrong. But if you can do this for me, I promise you I will explain everything tonight, and I promise you that after tonight, things are going to be different. Silence. Okay, she said. I'm doing it right now. Delete this call from your log. Both ends. Okay, you're very brave. I'll see you soon. I hung up and turned north on the highway. The drive to Genevieve's house in Westchester takes just over an hour when there's no traffic. It's beautiful in the way that old money is beautiful, discreet, understated, enormous. The property sat back from the road at the end of a gravel drive lined with oaks, 3 acres of manicured lawn dropping away behind the house to a small pond. The cell service died about half a mile before the turn. I had noticed this before and thought nothing of it. Now I understood it differently. I had a satellite communicator clipped to the inside of my bag, a small orange device, the kind hikers use above the tree line. Warren's number was programmed in, Attorney Price's number, and the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's department, which was currently trailing my car by 6 miles in an unmarked vehicle because Warren had spent the last 3 hours making very specific phone calls while I was at urgent care. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror at the last light before the turnoff. I looked tired. I looked like a woman who had been through a lot. I looked, in other words, exactly like someone Genevieve would expect to walk through her door. That was fine. I was going to use every single bit of it. She was waiting on the front steps when I pulled in. She had dressed carefully, charcoal trousers, a silk blouse, pearl earrings, the concerned matriarch. She opened her arms as I got out of the car, and I let her hug me, felt the small assessing quality of it, the way her hands pressed briefly against my back, as if checking for something. "I'm so glad you made it," she said, pulling back to look at my face with an expression of warm, practiced worry. "You look exhausted, sweetheart. Was the drive all right? You should have let someone come get you." "I'm fine," I said, and I let my voice be slightly thinner than usual. "The traffic was bad. I almost turned around twice." She made a soft sound, tilted her head, shot a glance toward the front door where I could see movement in the hallway shadow. Someone stepping back. "Come inside. It's cold." The house was warm and overlit, the way houses get when someone wants everything visible. The living room was arranged for company, 2 couches facing each other, the bar cart gleaming in the corner, a cheese board on the coffee table that no one had touched. There were 3 people already inside. Genevieve's sister, My aunt by marriage, a smaller, quieter version of the same calculated warmth, and two men I had never seen before. One was introduced as a friend of the family, a doctor who had known Genevieve for years. The introduction was casual, thrown off, the kind designed not to stick. He was standing slightly off to the side, not at the bar, not near the food, positioned. The second man was introduced as a colleague of Genevieve's brother. He didn't give me his full name. He shook my hand with a grip that felt like an assessment. I sat down where Genevieve directed me, facing the window. The curtains were open. I could see my own reflection in the glass, the room laid out behind me. "Let me get you something to drink," Genevieve said. "You need to relax. I can see how tense you are." She went to the bar cart. Her back was mostly to me, her movements smooth and unhurried, a woman doing something she had done hundreds of times. I watched the man she'd introduced as a doctor, watched the cart with the focused attention of someone waiting for a specific moment. She brought me a glass of red wine, held it out with both hands, a gesture of offering, of care. "It's a Pinot," she said. "Your favorite. Drink it slowly. There's no rush." I took the glass. I looked at it for a moment. The color was right. The smell was faintly sweet underneath the tannins, but faint enough that you'd need to be looking for it. I looked up at Genevieve. "Thank you," I said softly. I let my hand tremble just slightly around the stem. "I've been so off lately. I don't know what's happening to me." Her expression did something. It happened fast. Just a flicker. Not quite satisfaction. Not quite relief. Something colder than either. She touched my shoulder. "That's why we're all here," she said. "We're worried about you. We just want to help." The doctor had moved 2 steps closer without appearing to move at all. I raised the glass, looked around the room. Genevieve's sister had her hands folded in her lap, staring at the coffee table. She knew. She had always known. "To family," I said. "To family?" Genevieve echoed. I drank. The room held its breath. I could feel it, everyone waiting for something to begin. The doctor checked his watch. Genevieve set her glass down. The man by the doorway had straightened. 2 minutes passed. I set my glass down gently on the table. "I'd like to know," I said, in a completely normal voice, "how long you've been planning this." The silence that followed was different from the one before. Genevieve's face shifted. Small adjustments. The warmth, dialing down, replaced by something prepared. "What are you talking about?" "The conservatorship petition. Your brother filed it 2 weeks ago." I opened my bag and set the urgent care assessment on the coffee table. "I had a full cognitive evaluation at 8:47 tonight. I'm not impaired. I'm not in crisis. I am, in every measurable clinical sense, completely fine." The doctor took a step. I looked at him. "I wouldn't," I said. "You're being recorded." I set the satellite communicator on the table. The LED was solid green. "That's transmitting to my attorney and to the Westchester County Sheriff's Department. There are 2 deputies in the driveway right now." I turned to Genevieve. The wine was cranberry juice. My husband's niece switched the decanters 2 hours ago. Genevieve looked at the glass, back at me. Her face was doing something I had never seen it do before. It was losing its architecture. All the carefully arranged lines of concern and warmth just falling away, and underneath them was just a woman who had been caught. "You had no right," she started. "The will," I said. "The real one. Hendricks kept copies. He reached out to my accountant yesterday." I looked at her steadily. "You had 7 years to treat me like a person. You had 14 months since my father died. I gave you every chance." She found her voice. Hard and sharp. The voice I had always suspected was there behind the silk blouse. "You can't prove any of this. You're a grieving widow who missed appointments and forgot meetings, and we have 3 people in this room who can testify. To what? Said a voice from the front hallway. Attorney Price walked in from the front door, which the deputies had opened from outside. She was carrying a leather folder, and she looked like someone who had been waiting her entire career to walk into exactly this room. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers, and Warren, who looked exhausted and relieved in equal measure. Genevieve's sister stood up, sat back down. The 2 men exchanged a look. The doctor reached for his coat. "Sir," one of the officers said quietly, "please stay where you are." Price set the leather folder on the coffee table next to my cognitive assessment. "We have a copy of the original will, notarized and witnessed as held by Harold Hendricks, attorney of record. We have the filing discrepancies. And we have the preliminary conservatorship petition, which was filed without notifying the subject, which is not how that process works." She looked at Genevieve pleasantly. "There are some conversations that need to happen tonight." Genevieve's face had gone very still. I stood up. I walked across the room to the hallway, and Genevieve's granddaughter was standing there in the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching. She looked terrified and young, and like she had been holding something extremely heavy for a very long time. I put my arm around her. "You did great," I told her quietly. She leaned into me and didn't say anything for a moment. "What happens to me now?" she whispered. "That's up to you," I said. "But you're not staying here." Genevieve was still in the living room. I could hear her voice now, finding its footing, turning sharp, the performance cracking into something harder and uglier. The officers were calm. Price was calm. I didn't go back in. I had gotten what I came for. The months that followed were long and complicated in the way that legal processes always are. Lots of waiting, lots of paperwork, lots of phone calls with Price that ended with, "We'll know more next week." The conservatorship petition was dismissed within 30 days. The estate filing is being contested. That will take longer. The 2 men from the living room turned out to be a disbarred attorney and a private medical transport contractor with a suspended certification, the kind of details that sound made up but show up very precisely in court documents. Genevieve's granddaughter moved in with me in March. She's finishing her senior year at the high school 3 miles from my apartment. She makes coffee every morning before I'm up and leaves a cup on the counter with exactly the right amount of milk, which is a small thing that I find I am disproportionately grateful for every single day. My father's real will is being honored. The house, the accounts, the investment properties, none of it was ever really in danger once the truth was on the table. But that's not the part I think about most. I think about the years I spent believing I was the problem, believing the forgetting and the missing and the constant low-grade anxiety were just who I was, grief-soaked and barely holding it together. I think about how thoroughly I had been managed, not with cruelty, because cruelty you can recognize and name, with care, with concern, with a hand on the shoulder and a soft sigh and a voice that said, "I just want what's best for you," until I believed it, until I repeated it to myself in the mirror, until I started to see my own instincts as symptoms. The thing about being gaslit by someone who is also grieving alongside you is that their pain is real even when their motives aren't. Genevieve had lost a son. So had I, in the way you lose the life you thought you were going to have. We had been standing in the same wreckage. She had just decided to use it differently. I don't hate her. I don't have enough space in my life anymore for that kind of furniture. What I know now is this. Trust the thing inside you that notices, not the version of yourself that's been told you're unreliable, the original one, underneath all of that. The one that felt the dinner invitation was off, that felt the wine was wrong, that felt the room hold its breath when you raised the glass. That instinct never left. It was just waiting for someone to stop talking over it. I keep thinking about the wine glass, the way the light caught it when I lifted it, the way Genevieve said to family and meant something so different by it than I did. There's a version of that night where I don't pick up Warren's call. where I let it go to voicemail because I was already running late and I didn't want to be rude, where I drive up that winding road in Westchester, walk into that house, sit down at that table, and drink what I was given. I think about that version a lot, not with fear anymore, but with a kind of sobering clarity about how close the margin was, how much of what saved me came down to a single decision made in a hallway, coat half on, keys in hand. What I've come to believe is that outcomes are rarely random. Genevieve spent years building something, a reputation, a paper trail, a version of me that existed only in documents and other people's careful testimony. She was methodical, she was patient, and she lost anyway, not because luck turned against her, but because the things she did had consequences she couldn't fully control. She forged a will, and the original attorney kept his copies. She filed a petition and left a record. She planned a dinner and trusted that I would show up the same person I had always appeared to be. Every choice she made planted something that eventually came back to her. That's not poetic justice. That's just how actions work when they're built on something false. The structure holds until it doesn't. I think about what it actually took to walk into that room. Not bravery in the dramatic sense, not the movie version, where someone strides in fearless and certain. Real courage is quieter than that. It's making the calls you're terrified to make. It's sitting in a clinic at 9 p.m., asking a doctor to evaluate you because you need a piece of paper that says you're okay because you've spent so long being told you're not. It's asking a 17-year-old to be brave for 2 minutes and trusting that she will be. Genevieve's granddaughter stood in that kitchen and poured the decanter down the sink when every instinct in her was probably screaming not to make waves, not to cause problems, not to be a problem herself. She did it anyway. That's not nothing. That's everything. And I think about what it means to actually think your way through something instead of just reacting to it. The document on the coffee table, the time-stamped evaluation, the satellite communicator, the attorney on standby, the deputy 6 miles back. None of that happened by accident. It happened because I stopped and asked, what do I actually know? What do I actually need? And how do I make sure the truth is visible in the room before anyone can rewrite it? Being smart about something painful doesn't mean being cold. It means caring enough about the outcome to think before you move. Genevieve underestimated that. She had watched me grieve for 2 years and decided that grief had made me manageable. She confused someone who was hurting with someone who wasn't paying attention. Those are not the same thing. I was paying attention the whole time. I was just also trusting the wrong person. I don't carry that as shame anymore. I carry it as information. The house is quiet now in the mornings. There's a cup of coffee on my counter with exactly the right amount of milk. A teenager I didn't raise is learning, slowly, what it feels like to live somewhere safe. And I am learning, slower still, to trust the part of myself that was right all along.